welcome back. Mary Stevens of Athena School of Karate and my co-curator of the Animal Instincts Children's Self-Protection Teaching Program. On this show, we are discussing the upcoming debut of the Meerkat and Rabbit Comprehensive Physical Drills and Skills Syllabus. So this is the self-defense component of the Animal Instincts program. So it's a program for adults, for teachers of martial arts and self-protection. And on the show, Mary and I will be going through some of the material that we're covering and the reasons behind teaching that material to the 4 to 7-year-old and the 7 to 11-year-old badges of the Animal Instincts program. Hello, Mary Stevens, and welcome back to the show. This is a very special episode indeed. We are discussing the upcoming physical skills seminar, physical skills course, which forms the self-defense component in the Animal Instincts teaching program.
Absolutely. And really, really important there to underline for people that haven't already been hearing us banging on about this for ages, self-defense being the physical skills, and then obviously the broader umbrella of self-protection being the majority of the courses which people have been looking at online, which comprise what's more widely known as soft skills. So this is really some nitty-gritty first aid type hands-on intervention stuff. It'll be fun as well.
Absolutely, as it always is with Animal Instincts. When it comes to this particular course, I think it's important also to mention that this will be one of several that we'll be running. Obviously, not just for the different age groups. This one in particular is going to be for Meerkat and Rabbit. And just to date the podcast again, this is for the 10th of May 2025. We hope to be running many more like this one, but also for the other age groups too. Sorry, this is the 4 to 11-year-olds, the two categories being 4 to 7-year-olds and 7 to 11-year-olds.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be really fun for people to come along to, and also really incredibly useful because these are the kind of skills and drills that they can easily integrate into their martial arts warm-ups. It's a great pick up and play type material, which is going to be really incredibly useful in terms of building the right skills for students to defend themselves, but it doesn't have any particular martial arts bias. It could go into any physical skills class. It could be school PE for, it doesn't really matter. They're all really important foundational skills that are building the right kind of habits in younger students. For the kind of situations, not only the kind of situations they're likely to encounter at their age, but to build the right kind of skills early on for the kind of situations that they might face later on when they're a little bit more independent.
Yeah, I mean, we're not trying to retrain martial artists how to fight. This is not technique driven. It's very much within the basis of constraints-led activities. The idea being that there'll be plenty of physical skills that various instructors can teach. Obviously, and but we have certain things in place that we think will bring out the best in students. Very much an individualized approach. So again, I'm very cautious about talking about techniques when it comes to self-defense because that's often goes into stylization. And when you get stylization, then syllabuses just become very, very set in stone. There becomes a prescribed way of doing things, and as we know, as the case studies show, as can be seen in any kind of pressure test, any kind of physical activity, what is often the case is that different things work for different people, and this is very, very true for children as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and allowing them to find what works for them, and exploring the power of their own bodies is it's what's cool about this stuff is that although obviously it does have incredible functionality in terms of their safety, I mean, for the large part, they're just working in their bodies, finding out what their bodies can do and becoming more confident in themselves, which is the subliminal benefits and far more powerful really in terms of their long-term self-protection.
Yes, I mean, just now moving on to how the whole course is going to be set out. Don't want to be giving away too much. After all, we've got to come along and see what it's like. But just to give you, people who might be interested in either attending this course or one of the future courses, let's have a look at what we've got planned. It's often the case with both you and I. Time is very, very precious, and attention spans for children are very precious, as also they are for martial arts instructors, I hasten to add.
Yep.
So we don't really want to be wasting too much time in abstract activities, even when it comes to the warm up. There's vital material there. We want to be building behaviors. So we have a time management training theory, and that is we've got to keep everything relevant, and that means from the very, very beginning. So let's talk about even some of the warm ups that we do from the very, very beginning are things based on agility training. Can you talk a little bit about that, Mary, as well?
Well, I think what's interesting as well is that we can make it even more efficient by training agility training, and has benefits outside of that in terms of awareness and that kind of thing as well. And that frequently the kind of activities that we like to do in warm up are multifaceted, which is really useful. So yeah, agility, obviously a really good skills for escaping, and which is such a key feature and such an important skill that we teach for particularly under 11s. The rabbit age group is particularly characteristic of that one, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why we chose the rabbit as a symbol for that particular age group at 7 to 11-year-olds, when they're going to be likely to be more out and about, a little bit more independent than they would have been when they're much younger. Children, I'm talking about, and therefore it's going to be more about keeping their wits about them. Remaining agile, having really, really good escape plans in place, escape tactics, escape strategies. Why not warm people up straight away, doing activities that are going to, it's not going to, they're not going to pull a muscle. They're going to get the heart rates up. They're going to get the muscles warmed up. They're going to be activating the relevant muscle groups to move in the right way for the exercises that are going to be following. But most importantly, they're meeting some vital skills from the very beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that plays into the combination and the overlap between the hard skills and the soft skills, which is very articulate about making sure that the children themselves and their parents understand the benefits of what they're doing, and the wider, as well as the kind of narrower what we're actually doing right now, but what are the kind of connected skills.
Yeah. I mean, connecting these 2 points, actually, because we're talking about agility training at the moment, but also, as you've just pointed out, how the soft skills underlie all the hard skills. I mean, this is the vital point. This is why, people say, soft skills are the most important part. Soft skills are everything. Even when you're doing hard skills, you should be doing soft skills. This is kind of our point. The soft skills don't just stop when the hard skills start, because that would imply that your brain completely shuts off and it's all down to doing physical things. Well, the physical stuff has to be completely be run by the soft skills stuff. So one of the things with the soft skills is awareness, which you spoke about before. They're learning basic spatial awareness. Obviously, they're learning awareness of their surroundings, awareness of their environment. Obviously, self-awareness. I mean, this can all come straight down to getting people to walk. I mean, one of the really, really good activity that you can find with most people at the very beginning of a warm-up is to get people to walk. What's their, which will then move into things like posture and areas like that. How you carry yourself, what messages you're giving off, what's your body language like. That self-awareness, which is often missing from a lot of training. I mean, people give a bit of lip service to it, but actual proper self-awareness, and certainly in terms of self-protection. And again, an awareness of who they are. As children, they're not animals. They know what a mirror is all about. But they are, biologically speaking, they are animals, but they're very self-aware animals. And one of the things is knowing where your limitations are, but also where your strengths might lie. So although size may be something of a disadvantage when a child is in a dangerous situation with another human being, for example, another human being like an adult, their size can actually work to their advantage when it comes to training escape, when it comes to training evasions. So it's learning to teach them how to lean into that as well as part of that beginning area. And is there anything else you want to say on that part, Mary, before we just move on a little bit?
Not particularly, although I know we're going to talk about the differentiation between the two levels anyway, because what we're going to be teaching is going to be specifically divided into, this is what we teach the under sevens, this is what we teach the over sevens, because we have to draw a line somewhere, and they're definitely, roughly speaking, the under sevens are going to have an adult on hand pretty much all the time. The over sevens are more likely to be in a space where an adult is not necessarily right there, and that they're managing things more as a peer group. They're not going to be far from adult help, but those things are relevant really in terms of the maturity of what we're teaching. And I think that really when we're thinking about the meerkats with heads up, and then rabbits in terms of dodge, there's certain characteristics of why we've particularly chosen those animals as the emblems which characterize the set of skills that we're looking at for each age group here.
Yeah, I mean, a point that you have brought up on the courses, which those of you who haven't purchased an animal instincts course on the online training courses, is how resilience is becoming a more relevant subject. And we know we're at a stage where adults and teachers are having to accept that children are needing to learn resilience. I mean, that may, I would say it's a fairly good guess that this might have something to do with the post-COVID era that we're in. Although people could argue there were signs. I mean, every subsequent generation, so the nostalgic argument might go, has got softer in some way, should we say, less resilient is probably the better term for it. But we know now that regardless of whatever a person's opinions are, the information coming back to us is that children, adolescents need to actually mindfully build resilience, and teachers need to be aware of this. So it's not just a case of, I would say further back in the past, it was taken for granted because we would live hardier lives. Would you like to comment on that, Mary? I mean, I know you can bring that directly from formal education.
Yes, and the danger of asking me to comment on that is that we then massively overrun what we've set to do in terms of here. However, I will say this, that one of the issues that have been noticed in terms of the number of young people who are not in education or training, are not in employment, education or training, so NEETs, is that young people these days find a day's work incredibly stressful. Now that's the kind of thing that older people will just go, oh, they don't know, they've been born, it's stressful. But the fact is, there is a fragility about the generation that we have at the moment because of important developmental stages that have been missed, that we do need to be mindful of. And martial arts training is a fantastic pivot for building those skills of resilience, helping that kind of self-awareness and the ability to push through things and manage the discomfort that and make up for some of those gaps that the various generations have suffered from, really, and we weren't missing the same developmental stages that the students have experienced. So it's really important stuff, and it does stand to be incredibly beneficial. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, absolutely, preach on. Please do. We've touched upon this, but just briefly again. Early impressions matter when it comes to teaching, when it comes to training. People, and I've definitely found this to be a case in martial arts when I've been involved with teaching a lot of martial arts cross training, that people tend to retain what they learn earliest, what they learn first. This is why we have this thing about when you're trying to override bad habits. It's a lot harder to override bad habits than it is to teach new habits. So it's another reason why we have this time managed sort of training where we're trying to not waste any time on superfluous activities, that we're keeping everything objective driven, everything on target, purposeful, and with that in mind, I'm just reiterating the point that we emphasize tactical escape first. It's got to be the default when it comes to children.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many fun ways in order to train that, and then to help them to understand why that is and what the mentality is. And, depending on the group that you've got, some of them really enjoy kind of scenario training. I don't mean scenario training. Like, as soon as you say that to martial artists, they're thinking red man suits and nightclubs and all of this kind of stuff. But kids will bring in, and this is the other massive focus that we have in Animal Instincts, is listening to the kids and seeing what they're bringing in. And kids will bring in so many. Every week in my dojo, kids will bring in a situation that happened in the playground, how a standoff, how it came about, and then we might play through various versions of what might have happened and what follow-up could be from there. And in terms of like the purpose of escape being to something as opposed to away from something, for children of that age to understand how they access their adult and then how to articulate to their adult, what's happened, all of that comes under that tactical escape and building escape skills, and then follow up from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, in addition to escape, raising the alarm is a really important point, and also when needed to be assertive. So this is all about children finding their voice. So of course that very much goes into soft skills, very much a soft skill issue as well. But we can directly apply it and should directly apply it to physical skills as well, where voice should be attached. Again, using your voice in the most simple primal way was something I was shown growing up in a circus. Obviously if you were because of a high risk situation, you have to alert people, being direct about what you say, but also sometimes in the case when you'd have a dangerous animal situation or something like that, voice.
My arm off.
Yeah, exactly. Using voice. My mother was very strong on emphasizing use voice above anything else. So again, really important for children as well, especially with you get a lot of children who are shy or get embarrassed, and so again, but it's a vital skill that can make a lot of difference in a self-defense situation.
Yeah, definitely. And there's particular key phrases that we teach, as well as the body language that goes alongside it. So the body language is a physical skill as well. And, really, tally that with the voice, and then you've got some really important stuff going on there.
Moving on into the non-technique driven area of our training, and keeping on with the way that we are very much game centric, very much into gamifying activities. I'd like to discuss something that is known as roughhousing. As an element. I know a lot of child psychiatrists have looked at it in a very positive way in recent years. And I think it's, I certainly found it to be a very important area when I was teaching clubs of children, the concept of roughhousing, where there was this weird disconnect between a lot of martial arts classes, shall we say, and children at play. So you'd have children at play engaging in roughhousing back at home, either with their parents or with their friends or with their siblings. Very natural behavior, very natural, expressive, animalistic behavior that goes on throughout childhood and into adolescence. And they turn up at a martial arts class where they came there to learn discipline. So, fair enough. It's an environment where it's very structured, and there's the positive benefit of that. But they would be then engaging in forms of sparring, if they did do sparring, that were then far removed from what they were doing back at home and far less realistic and practical. Whereas and furthermore, more alien to them, and therefore less likely to be accessible in a high-pressured situation. So we contend that if roughhousing, if handled in an intelligent way, if handled in a way that is carefully channeled and directed, can be an excellent way for children to learn. Just another aspect of play that can be then directly applied to real-life counter-violence situations.
Absolutely. And, if this is something that over the years, I've really noticed a big difference in kids who have lots of siblings that are used to being piled on, and kids that have grown up perhaps as only children and just simply don't have that same experience of being, sat on, squashed, elbowed. And if their first experience of that is someone who's actively hostile, then you're much more likely to get a freeze response
Yes.
from that. which is then something that they have to deal with separately. Whereas if that feels situation normal and then is a platform to work from, then it's a completely different thing. You're starting much higher up the ladder in terms of how you deal with that. So it is exactly the kind of thing that can be developed and should be developed in martial arts dojos for those of us who are teaching that age group, incorporating games that allow children to understand their power, their control, their boundaries, and all of those different things are the really important pivots that we can have for them there.
Oh yeah, there's so much that can come off that. I mean, not just in terms of developing pressure testing, developing sparring, etc., but also, as you say, setting boundaries, saying when something is not okay, and understanding how that would then directly apply to roughhousing for fun outside of lessons, for example. So yeah, it's really, really good. As I say, multiple benefits, which then leads us into age-appropriate self-defense skills.
Certain techniques that we can teach that would be kind of a lower level, and in terms of what's age appropriate, they also depend very much in a children's self-protection course, children's self-defense course. What do you need to do in order to get help? Yes. That particular situation. So whether it's overly invasive siblings or cousins or friends or whatever, or whether it's a school type situation. If you are under 7, as we talked about before, your adult is not going to be that far away and shouldn't be that difficult to alert. But if you're over 7, then that's a somewhat different. You might need to make more physical interventions yourself in order to get to a point where you can escape to your adult.
Yes.
And those are really important considerations that do contextually what's relevant for a 5-year-old is not the same as what's relevant for an 8-year-old in that particular situation.
Yeah, exactly. It's just another example of the meerkat and rabbit distinctions. The thing that separates the different levels. So rabbit, just to briefly state on this one. Students who will be learning the Rabbit program, and as we'll be teaching it, will be learning everything that's done in the meerkat, but obviously it will go through the lens of an older child, but there'll also be additional material as well in there. I'm not going to go too much into details on that, but again, it's also now worth mentioning that the limitations that we do face with children when teaching self-protection, and also many ways why we need to teach them self-protection, the very basics on things like boundary setting and understanding how to use the fence, for example, and how to adapt that for children, simply because it's all down to their mental development in many ways. I mean, there's some obvious physical differences, obviously, with children when they're growing up, but from a mental perspective, there's things like a la road safety. Children's visual perception doesn't fully mature until around the age of 5 to 7 years old. Okay, so that then brings us right to the end of meerkat and the beginning of rabbit, and that's when the early sensory areas of the cortex have completed their development. But even then, the functional development of the brain substrates for perception of complex visual scenes takes still longer. So, yeah. So we're still using this development where it's not always easy for them to guess, to gauge rather, distancing, speeds, etc. So we're trying to do this often when we're teaching them traffic safety, and we're teaching them how to cross the road, and just general rules along those lines. But it also obviously directly applies to handling potentially aggressive people.
Yes, indeed. And that maturity began really kind of honing in on the rabbit level here, where they do start to have more responsibility for themselves and consequences of their actions. So they do need to have a full understanding that if they do use their physical skills in order to liberate themselves from a situation, let's say, that they will need to judge what's appropriate, and that once they get to 10, and this is a really interesting, but in the UK, once they get, in England, Wales, once they get to 10, yes. Then they have criminal responsibility. And that's such an interesting conversation to have with kids. When do they think that's appropriate? And when do they have that broader understanding? And when do they feel they have that kind of ability to judge and to be responsible for the consequences of their actions? And when should it just be, oh, it's their parents' fault? I really enjoy having those conversations with kids and then working on that in terms of their levels of control. And even if you're not in England and Wales where the age is 10, discussing why the age might be somewhere else and what are the consequences of that for people's behaviour is also a really valuable thing to explore with this particular age group.
Yeah, and of course that then just moves on to just a final topic just before we go, which is the shock horror that we teach children how to use weapons, Mary.
Yes, or at least how to detect when people might be wanting to use weapons on them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've heard this as a rumor. I'm not entirely sure whether it is true. Of course, I'm sure none of our little middle class Englishers don't do this. But apparently, children actually know how to pick up objects and hit other children with those particular objects.
I've never seen such.
I mean, it's terrible, isn't it? Exactly. So yes, it's a natural behavior. Bottom line is, bottom line, natural animalistic behavior. Don't believe it? Read Desmond Morris's Man Watching, or we've known this for a long time.
Whacking each other with a Lego.
Yeah. It's a sure way if you want some chaos at Christmas is to buy 2 sets of plastic swords or any sort of object, or they'll find it, they'll use it. But the point being is that, again, like the rough housing, we can as we are teaching things like, and it came out with all the it comes out on our soft skills courses, we're teaching weapon awareness, we're teaching everything along to why you shouldn't carry an actual weapon or anything intended to be used as a weapon. That's all covered in our soft skills work, and we do the scenario based work on that one, whether someone might be carrying. But in terms of using objects as barriers, as means to equalize a situation, if somebody is using a weapon, again, because obviously peers, if the threat is one of their peers and the peers are using a weapon, a child needs to know how to correctly access an incidental weapon, if for nothing else, as a form of barrier in order to facilitate their escape. But again, all of that then just comes down to a degree of weapon training, and to ignore that, I think, is irresponsible as well, because number one, it's the danger that they're facing, but also because it's a natural instinct that children have anyway. So we might as well, out of the rough housing, as I said before, we channel it in a positive direction. We channel it in an objective driven way, and as what you were just discussing before with regards to development, that they understand what the repercussions of that might be whenever a weapon comes into play.
I think there's a fear with instructors that if you start doing weapons education at this age, that will be too much, or that the kids won't be ready, or the parents will freak out. Actually, the reverse has been true in my own experience of teaching this.
Yes.
That the young people like to engage with it. They're very interested in it. They have a great deal to contribute from there. And parents, I think, for the most part, are grateful if it's being taught in a responsible way. Then to learn more about it can only benefit their children, particularly in terms of how you explain what you're teaching. And having that communication, of course, is also really important, which is something that we...
Yeah, absolutely, and it aligns with the same attitude that we take to teaching preemptive actions. Whatever the preemptive action, the idea that we would teach a child to do something physically first in a situation when that might be justified, when that might apply. Once the context is taught, I've had no problem with presenting that in front of head teachers, in front of a variety of different people in positions of authority, and safeguarding care for children. Once they understand the context, once they understand how it's being taught, and that is always the key. I think that is one of the big things we can provide with Animal Instincts, and definitely will benefit for participants on this course, and hopefully our future teachers in the Animal Instincts program, that they'll it's how they teach this material more than anything else.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we're going to wrap up. So just to say that there's a lot more on edged weapons in our later courses. But for now, having some kind of basis, in fact, and also, as you talked about, most of the kids will have had the experience of what, somebody trying to hit them with a stick, or, anything that there's just picked up, and those things can then become a progression into the more dangerous objects that we look at for the later stages.
Excellent. So 10th of May 2025, the Animal Instincts Meerkat and Rabbit Comprehensive Physical Drills and Skills Syllabus. It's restricted to 6 people. So 6 people interested, either becoming teachers. Sorry,
We've only got 4 places left.
We've only got what? Sorry, 4 places left.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, at the time. Okay, so the time of this recording, we've only got 4 places left now. Actually, at the time of this recording, we now have only 3 places left. So, so get on there, or otherwise you're going to have to be looking towards a future course which we haven't got booked yet. Again, you don't have to be part of the Animal Instincts teaching program. You might want to learn this to integrate it into your teaching of children in your martial arts club or self-defense courses. Mary, thanks so much for being on the podcast again, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Fab. Thanks, Jamie.
Before you go, one last piece of information that we missed out on this particular interview, and that is all participants on the Animal Instincts program will receive a video resources pack and manual. We are creating a special video that goes through all the physical skills, drills contained on the course. So you'll be able to go home with that to go back over all the material. You're not expected to just retain it in one day. As I've spoken before, and I did on the last podcast with Les Bubka, recording information is pretty important for martial arts training, and not everyone is great at taking notes, or note taking sometimes can be a distraction for some people when they're trying to learn on the day. So we're doing all that for you. You'll have all the resources for when you leave this particular intensive training day.